The ground trembled beneath their feet. Workers across German factories paused mid-task. Farmers looked up from their morning chores. Children stopped their games in village streets. Something was coming. Something massive was approaching from the western horizon. The sound reached them first, a low rumble that grew steadily louder. Not thunder, not weather. This was mechanical. This was man-made. This was American. October 14, 1943, would become the day everything changed. The morning when German defenders realized they faced something unprecedented in warfare. Industrial might made visible in aluminum and steel. What began as routine autumn work across the German countryside transformed into a moment of national awakening. The war had taken a fundamental turn. American production capacity was no longer theoretical. It filled the sky above their heads. The watcher sees everything. High above the peaceful farmland near Schweinfurt, one German soldier stared through field glasses at the approaching storm. Obergefreiter Hans Müller gripped his binoculars tighter. His hands trembled slightly. The western sky was darkening, but not with clouds. With aircraft. More aircraft than he had ever seen in his 3 years of military service. Row upon row of silver bombers stretched across the horizon. Miller counted formations until the numbers became meaningless. These weren't the typical British night raids. This was daylight bombing on a scale that defied imagination. American heavy bombers flying in perfect combat formations. The psychological impact hit him immediately. Germany was no longer fighting a regional European war. They were fighting American industrial supremacy. The full productive capacity of a continent had arrived in European skies. His field telephone crackled to life. Reports flooded in from observation posts across western Germany. The same sight everywhere. Massive bomber formations approaching from multiple directions. All American. All heading deep into the Reich. The numbers defied belief. Intelligence reports would later confirm 291 heavy bombers, B-17 flying fortresses, and B-24 Liberators. Each aircraft represented months of American factory production. Thousands of workers, millions of rivets. The accumulated output of a fully mobilized democracy. America's war machine revealed. Behind those gleaming bombers lay a story of transformation that German planners had underestimated. The United States had converted its peacetime economy into something unprecedented in human history. Factories that once produced automobiles now turned out aircraft engines. Women who had worked in department stores now riveted aluminum sheets. Farmers' sons learned to navigate by stars and operate complex bomb sites. The scale of mobilization was staggering. Boeing plants operated around the clock. 3 shifts per day. 7 days per week. At peak production, American factories delivered new heavy bombers faster than Germany could train pilots to intercept them. This wasn't just about numbers. This was about sustainability. American training programs graduated thousands of new aircrew monthly. German training struggled with fuel shortages and dwindling aircraft reserves. The mathematics favored democracy. Every bomber formation represented something deeper. American educational systems that could teach complex technical skills to young men from rural communities. Industrial processes that turned raw materials into precision weapons. Logistics networks that delivered finished aircraft to English bases. The site above Schweinfurt demonstrated what total war actually meant. Not just military forces engaged in combat. Entire national economies reorganized for victory. Civilian populations contributing directly to military outcomes through industrial production. Thunder from above fills the air. The sound intensified as formations passed overhead. 4 Wright Cyclone engines per bomber. Over 1,000 engines creating mechanical thunder that echoed across German countryside. Inside each aircraft, young Americans who had been in high school classrooms just months earlier now operated as precision bombing crews. Farm boys from Iowa manning machine guns. College students from California navigating over hostile territory. The cold was brutal at 25,000 feet. Temperatures dropped to minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Oxygen masks were essential for survival. Frost formed on gun barrels and cockpit windows. These weren't comfortable missions. Each crew member understood the odds. Statistical analysis showed average life expectancy of 11 missions for heavy bomber crews. They needed to complete 25 missions for a combat tour. The mathematics were sobering. Yet they kept flying. Mission after mission. Formation after formation. Demonstrating the kind of sustained courage that wins wars. Individual bravery multiplied by industrial capacity. Their formations told a story of tactical evolution. Early bombing missions had suffered terrible casualties. Loss rates reaching 8% made combat tours statistically impossible to survive. Lessons were learned through bitter experience. Combat box formations maximized defensive firepower. Staggered altitudes allowed multiple bombers to concentrate guns on attacking fighters. Lead bombardiers were selected for entire formations to improve bombing accuracy. Tactical improvements came at the cost of blood and aluminum. But the fundamental advantage remained industrial. For every bomber lost, American factories produced replacements faster than German defenses could destroy them. The mathematics of attrition favored mass production. German defenders prepare for battle. Across Western Germany, Luftwaffe squadrons received alert orders. Experienced pilots ran to their aircraft. Ground crews armed cannons and topped-off fuel tanks. The most sophisticated air defense system in the world prepared to engage. These weren't inexperienced defenders. Many pilots were veterans of the Battle of Britain. Others had survived combat on the Eastern Front. They understood aerial warfare. They knew how to kill bombers. Messerschmitt, Bf-109s, and Focke-Wulf 190s scrambled from dozens of airfields. Twin-engine Bf-110s and Junkers Ju-88 heavy fighters joined the defensive formation. Over 300 German fighters rose to meet the American bombers. The integrated defense system was formidable. Ground-based radar tracked incoming formations. Radio controllers guided fighters to intercept positions. Anti-aircraft batteries prepared to engage bombers passing within range. Flak positions surrounded every major target. 80 mm 105 mm and 128 mm anti-aircraft guns could throw explosive shells to bomber altitudes. The flak corps eventually numbered over 1 million personnel. Germany took air defense seriously. But even German commanders recognized something different about this raid. The sheer scale overwhelmed standard defensive procedures. Normal tactics assumed formations of 50 to 100 bombers. This was 3 times larger than anything previously attempted. Hauptmann Klaus Weber pushed his Messerschmitt into a steep climb. His engine screamed at maximum power. Below him, German countryside looked peaceful. Above him, the sky was about to become a battlefield, unlike anything the world had seen. Weber was an experienced pilot. 3 years of combat flying had taught him the deadly mathematics of aerial warfare, but what he witnessed through his cockpit canopy defied his experience. American bombers stretched across the horizon in formations so vast they seemed to block the sun. This wasn't just another bombing raid. This was industrial warfare made visible, manufacturing supremacy that tactical skill couldn't overcome. The forces collide in deadly embrace. At 14:36 hours, as American formations reached Worms, Germany, the bombers revealed their target. Schweinfurt, home to Germany's critical ball-bearing industry. Components manufactured there were essential for aircraft engines, tank transmissions, submarine equipment. Ball bearings might seem insignificant, but modern machinery couldn't function without precision-manufactured spheres rolling smoothly in metal races. American planners had identified this vulnerability. Destroy ball-bearing production and German war machinery would grind to a halt. It was strategic bombing at its most focused. Industrial targeting designed to cripple an entire war economy. The German defenders understood the stakes. This wasn't just another target. This was industrial heart surgery performed with high explosive. Success could paralyze German military production for months. P-47 Thunderbolt escort fighters had reached their operational limits near the German border. In a gesture both professional and poignant, the American fighters waggled their wings in farewell. From this point forward, the bombers flew alone. 291 aluminum fortresses penetrated deep into Nazi Germany, with only their own guns for protection. Defensive firepower consisted of up to 13 50-caliber machine guns per bomber. Concentrated in tight formations, this created substantial defensive zones, but German fighters had evolved tactics specifically designed to overcome bomber defensive advantages. Single-engine fighters attacked head-on where bomber defensive fire was weakest. Twin-engine aircraft launched rockets from beyond machine gun range. The air battle that followed spanned 200 miles of German airspace. It lasted over 2 hours. Veterans on both sides would remember it as the most intense aerial combat they ever experienced. Individual courage meets industrial warfare. Inside the bombers, young Americans manned their guns with professional competence. Staff Sergeant Michael O'Brien of the 306th Bomb Group adjusted his top turret weapons as German fighters approached. The noise was indescribable. 4 radial engines roaring at full power. 50-caliber machine guns hammering in staccato bursts. Wind whistling through holes torn by German cannon shells. Over the intercom, crew members called fighter positions with detached professionalism. These weren't movie heroes. These were teenagers from small American towns who found themselves in aluminum aircraft 5 miles above hostile territory. The psychological stress was enormous. But they performed their duties with remarkable competence. Each gun position required specific skills. Top turret gunners tracked high-speed fighters through powered gun sights. Ball turret gunners hung suspended beneath the aircraft in plexiglass spheres. Waist gunners fired through open windows in sub-zero temperatures. Coordination was essential. Multiple gunners engaging the same target wasted ammunition. Discipline prevented friendly fire incidents when damaged bombers dropped out of formation. Training showed in moments of extreme stress. German fighters pressed attacks with deadly effectiveness. 20-millimeter cannon shells could tear massive holes in aluminum aircraft. Single hits could destroy engines or kill crew members. The killing was impersonal, but devastating. From his cockpit, Hauptmann Weber witnessed scenes that haunted him forever. American bombers hit by cannon fire dropped from formation trailing smoke and flame. Crews attempted desperate bailout procedures while under continuing attack. But for every bomber that fell, 10 more continued toward target. Crews maintained formation discipline even as friends died around them. Weber scored hits on multiple B-17s, watching cannon shells tear chunks from wings and fuselages. American bombers absorbed punishment that would have destroyed any German aircraft. Crews nursed damaged planes toward target with determination that impressed even enemies. Weber later wrote, "They just kept coming." No matter how many we shot down, there were always more. The German pilots fought magnificently. Individual courage and tactical skill made the Luftwaffe legendary. But they fought against something training never prepared them for. Industrial capacity made manifest in aluminum and steel. For every German fighter committed to battle, America produced bombers at rates that seemed supernatural. The mathematical advantage was overwhelming. Democratic production versus authoritarian efficiency. Mass production won. Target reached through wall of fire. Despite ferocious German resistance, surviving American bombers reached Schweinfurt. Bomb bay doors opened. Loads dropped toward ball-bearing factories below. The bombing was reasonably accurate by 1943 standards. Significant damage was inflicted on manufacturing facilities. Production would be disrupted for months. Strategic objectives were achieved, but the cost was tremendous. 60 B-17 flying fortresses would not return to English bases. 600 young Americans were killed, wounded, or captured. The loss rate reached 20.6% of attacking force. Such casualties were unsustainable. Repeated losses at this rate would destroy the 8th Air Force more effectively than German defensive measures. Immediate questions arose about daylight precision bombing effectiveness. But German defenders understood something American commanders took weeks to grasp. Their tactical victory was strategic defeat. They had won the battle while losing the war. Hauptmann Weber landed with empty ammunition boxes and damaged engine. He had fought well, but he had witnessed something that changed everything. The Americans had demonstrated capacity that no amount of German skill could ultimately overcome. Intelligence officers analyzing the day's events reached sobering conclusions. Americans had mounted their largest daylight raid yet. Formations this size would become routine as production reached full capacity. General Adolf Galland studied after-action reports with growing concern. His pilots had performed magnificently. More American bombers were shot down than in any previous engagement. But mathematical reality was inescapable. Germany could not sustain loss rates needed to inflict such damage indefinitely. Aircraft industry under bombardment struggled to replace fighters. Pilot training hampered by fuel shortages couldn't match American capacity. The integrated air defense system was being overwhelmed by operational scale. What seemed formidable against smaller raids became inadequate against industrial-strength bombing campaigns. American response shapes future strategy. Back in England, 8th Air Force commanders grappled with Black Thursday implications. Immediate response was scaling back deep penetration missions until adequate escort became available. P-51 Mustang fighters fitted with external fuel tanks were already in development. Long-range escort capability would soon provide protection throughout entire missions over Germany. Strategic implications were clear to perceptive observers on both sides. America had demonstrated capacity to mount 1,000-bomber raids. Industrial base could sustain such operations indefinitely. October 14th wasn't aberration. It was preview. Young aircrew members who survived returned to English bases with new understanding. They weren't just flying bombing missions. They were participants in warfare that would decide entire conflict outcome. Courage displayed over Schweinfurt would need repeating hundreds of times as air offensive intensified. Individual heroism was essential, but victory required sustained effort on unprecedented scale. The tide turns decisively. By early 1944, tactical situation had fundamentally changed. P-51 Mustang escort fighters arrived in sufficient numbers for complete mission protection deep into Germany. American bomber formations grew larger and more frequent. German fighter resistance gradually weakened under pilot attrition and fuel shortage pressures. The balance shifted decisively toward Allied air power. Big Week in February 1944 provided the climax. Perfect weather allowed coordinated attacks, dropping 16,566 tons of bombs on German aircraft industry during 6 days. These raids fatally reduced production capacity and established air superiority. Lieutenant General James Doolittle assumed 8th Air Force Command in January 1944. New tactics sent Mustang fighters ahead of bomber formations to attack Luftwaffe on ground and in air. Mustang's success rates demonstrated complete balance shift. 19 kills for every Mustang lost showed how thoroughly American air power had achieved dominance over European skies. Human cost of victory. Victory came at enormous price. 8th Air Force lost almost 26,000 personnel killed in action, another 28,000 wounded. Over 4,000 aircraft were lost in combat operations. RAF Bomber Command suffered similar proportional losses. Aircrew service became one of most dangerous assignments in British or American military. Statistical survival rates were sobering for young volunteers, but sacrifices achieved strategic objectives. By 1945, combined Anglo-American bomber offensive had effectively destroyed German industrial capacity. Complete air superiority was established over Europe. German cities lay in ruins. Transportation networks were shattered. Luftwaffe was reduced to ineffectiveness. The industrial base that supported Nazi war machine was systematically dismantled from above. Obergefreiter Hans Müller survived the war. Decades later, he reflected on what he witnessed that October morning. We knew at that moment Germany could not win. Americans had brought their factories to Europe. Nothing could stop them. The young German soldier who first spotted massive American formations had witnessed decisive moment. Looking up at vast armada of silver bombers, he was seeing the future. Legacy written in aluminum and steel. Air war over Europe demonstrated decisive importance of industrial capacity in modern warfare. German tactical excellence and individual courage couldn't overcome American production mathematics. By 1944, American factories produced aircraft at rates that seemed impossible. Boeing alone turned out 16 B-17 flying fortresses per day at peak production. This wasn't just about numbers, it was about sustainability. When Germany lost experienced pilot, replacement required months of training with scarce fuel and aircraft. When America lost aircrew, replacement personnel arrived from programs graduating thousands monthly. Psychological impact on German defenders was profound and lasting. Veterans of Eastern Front found themselves facing opponent with seemingly unlimited capacity to replace losses and escalate operations. Sight of 1,000 bomber formations became daily reminder that Germany fought not just Britain and Soviet Union, but entire industrial capacity of North America. The final demonstration. What German troops witnessed October 14, 1943, was more than bombing raid. It was visible manifestation of democratic industrial power. Every B-17 flying fortress represented thousands of American workers, from aluminum miners in Pennsylvania to aircraft assemblers in Seattle. Every aircrew represented educational system training farm boys to navigate by stars. 8th Air Force became unstoppable not through superior tactics or individual courage, though both were abundant. It became unstoppable because it represented concentrated productive capacity of fully mobilized democracy. As war entered final phase, American bomber formations darkening European skies became routine. German defenders, initially shocked by 200 or 300 bombers, eventually faced raids involving over 1,000 aircraft attacking multiple targets simultaneously. March 18, 1945, raid on Berlin involved 1,029 bombers and 733 fighters. numbers that would have been inconceivable 2 years earlier. By war's end, 8th Air Force encompassed 40 heavy bomber groups and 15 fighter groups. Over 200,000 personnel flew more than 300,000 bomber sorties. They dropped over 600,000 tons of bombs on Axis targets. Most importantly, they demonstrated that American industrial democracy possessed resources authoritarian regimes couldn't match. The young German soldier in Watchtower had witnessed moment when Second World War outcome became inevitable. Sky caught fire that October day. From flames emerged new understanding of modern warfare. 8th Air Force became unstoppable through accumulated weight of American determination, ingenuity, and productive capacity. Lesson was written across European sky in aluminum and contrails. When free societies fully mobilize resources, they possess advantages no amount of tactical skill can overcome. German troops, witnessing 1,000 bombers darkening sky, saw the future. They recognized their cause was ultimately doomed. Industrial democracy had revealed its true power, not in single battles or tactical innovations, but in sustained application of organized productive capacity over time. The mathematics were inescapable. The outcome was inevitable. America had brought its factories to war. German defenders, however brave, couldn't compete with continental production capacity. The sky above Schweinfurt had become classroom in industrial warfare. The lesson was clear to anyone willing to learn. Democracy mobilized possessed resources that authoritarian efficiency couldn't match. Individual heroism remained essential. But victory required something more. It required the accumulated effort of entire free society committed to common purpose. That October morning, looking up at endless formations of silver bombers, German observers understood they faced something unprecedented. Not just military force, but the concentrated will of free people determined to preserve their way of life. The sky had caught fire. From that fire emerged understanding that would reshape post-war world. When democracies fully commit their resources, when free societies mobilize their productive capacity, when educated populations unite behind common cause, the results can overwhelm any opponent. The lesson written across German skies that October day would echo through remainder of war and beyond. Industrial democracy, once awakened, possessed advantages that tactical brilliance couldn't overcome. The young men in those silver bombers carried more than bombs. They carried the future.